Hey, what's up everybody? Jason here. Thanks for stopping by the channel today. So I'm going to do a multi-part series on building a survey tool in Bubble. So let's check out this site that I have. So I am working on a new music tutorial and community site. So it's going to have like a miniature LMS in it and cover everything from songwriting to capturing ideas to recording, releasing, mixing, stuff like that. Now it's going to be targeted at beginners, and I want to collect some information from people who might be interested in this. First, number one, to validate the idea, and second, so I can design the courses and the community around what people actually want. So I was going to build a little survey tool, so I thought I would do a quick video for this. So let's dive into it. So since I'm going to do this as a multi-part series, I'm going to start off with just a very simple tutorial and a very simple survey tool, essentially. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to have a survey table, and let's make that text a little bigger so we can actually read it. There we go. And the survey table, it'll have the name of the survey, it'll have a description, a list of questions, and a short code. Now, if you've watched my other videos, you know I like to use the idea of short codes. It's kind of like the same way WordPress does. When you use a plugin, it gives you a little short code, which will automatically pluck whatever the output of that plugin is on the page. So I like to do the same thing because I'm going to build a reusable component where I just have to pass in the short code and it'll generate the survey for me. So I'm going to have a survey table. I'm going to have a survey question table. And so that means I'm obviously going to change this to list of survey questions just for the naming. So for now, this is just going to be a text-based survey. I'm going to be doing some add-ons to this over time. So this is just going to literally have just the question, and maybe I'll have required yes or no. And then possibly I will have a character limit. But for this one, I'll probably just keep it as simple as humanly possible. So now I'm going to need some place to store the responses. So I'm going to have survey question responses table. And this will contain the survey question, which will be a link to the survey question table, and then the response from the user. And that's it for now. So some of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to have a database trigger that emails me when a new survey happens, because that's pretty simple to do. And then I'm probably going to reuse some of the AI stuff that I built on other sites and just have summaries. So when people are putting in kind of what they want to get out of the course, I can get a summary from AI, because I have no idea if people are going to use this or what. So I want to keep this as simple as possible for now. So let's build the things. So let's first get the survey. I'm going to create that type. I'm going to have name, the text, the description, which is also going to be text. What else did I have on here? Short code. And then I'm going to have a list of questions. So first I need to make the survey questions thing. And this will be the question. And I'll put this in for now, required yes or no, but I probably won't implement it in this one. And then character limit, I'll put it in that as well, which would be a number. And then now I'm going to need the survey question responses. And that is going to be the survey question. And the user response, which is going to be text. So now survey, This is going to need a list of questions, so survey questions, which will be a list. And then if I wanted to, which I guess I will, I'll put the responses in there too. I'll put a list of the survey responses. And make that a list as well. So that's probably enough to get started. Now I'm going to design the UI for doing the actual survey. So let's put in some fake data for now. So surveys, so I'm going to call this one my All right, so the questions are in there. Yes, I'm going to build an admin tool to be able to do this, but this at least gives me enough to get started. So I'm going to do this in a pop-up, and survey. Type of content for this is going to be survey, and I'm going to make this almost full screen. So let's just make this 95%. And 95%. Obviously, I'll come up with a better name for this, but for right now, let's just call this survey. So because I'm going to make this a reusable element, let's just convert this right away. And let's call it, I always prefix everything with RE, so reusable element, and let's just call it pop-up survey for now. Type of element is survey. And I want this to be survey, and this is not optional. So this is going to force me to set the pop-up survey. Okay, so now let's get rid of this. So see, it's going to ask me for that already, and let me just set the size of this to be almost 100%. So it's almost full screen. Survey to show. I want to do a search for survey where the shortcode equals onboarding. Bubble will get rid of that. I really wish they would fix that. It's very annoying trying to type stuff in here sometimes. Anyway, and I want the first item. So I could also do the same thing with data source if I wanted to. I like to use properties just because that's just how I like to do it. If you don't like to do it, don't do it that way. All right, so let's go back to the reusable element. Okay, well first let's make sure we show this element here so I can show that. Reload the page. Okay, so it's going to pop up the survey, which is good. So now let's get into the good stuff. I'm probably going to not worry too much about making this pretty right now. So I'm going to set this to the pop-up, to the property, and then the name, so they know what the name of the survey is that they're filling out. And then this is going to be the pop-up's property, the description. So that could maybe be instructions or whatever it is. Now there's a couple of ways that you could make this ultimately reusable simply just by doing a repeating group here with the questions. So I'm going to put a repeating group down here, and let's call this survey questions. This is going to be survey questions, and the data is going to come from the pop-up survey, the survey that's loaded, and the survey questions. Now for this one, it doesn't matter if they're in order or not, but just for the sake of argument, let's just go ahead and update that. So let's add a order to this. So the order is going to be the numeric range, and let me go back in here. Okay, so I want to sorted by the order, descending, no. So we'll put them all in order. I don't want to fix the number of rows, and I want this to be, hey, I'm getting a spam call. Yay. Oh well, that's the fun part about doing live builds. Okay, so let's go ahead and toss the questions in here. And I'm going to make this a heading 6. So there's the question. So now I can go back here and pop this up, and it's just probably going to list all the questions. So there's all the questions. So in a future update, what I'm going to do is, because some of the questions, it might be a single line of text, some it might be multi-line, etc. So in a future update, the survey questions will have type. And what I plan to do there is just to have a list of probably option sets where I'll have single line of text, multi-line of text, something that's a single phrase, so I can use that in conditions basically to show the right input box if I want. But for this one, these are all just going to be multi-line inputs for now. So this is going to be question 1 response. Or sorry, I'm just going to say question response. And now let's put a submit button under here, and I want to shrink this. There we go. Submit survey. Okay, so here's the tricky part. I need to create separate records for all of these and then attach the answers to the survey itself. Now I can't do this with just an inline workflow because I can't access the collection of questions here. So what I would need to do is to add a workflow and then run an API workflow on a list. Now the problem with that is if I put the, because I want to run it on the survey questions on that list, and then a workflow. So I just created a sample one here, create survey question responses. I can pass in this question, but I can't access the input box. So there's nothing in here that's going to allow me to grab that out of the repeating group. So I'm going to have to handle this a different way. So let's delete that workflow. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use a temporary table. So what I'm going to do is when this input value is changed, I'm going to write that to a temporary response table with a unique session ID and the question. This will allow people to add their input and also update it, and then that will save to the database before I actually submit the survey, and then I'll just move the questions from the temp table into the main one. So let's create that temp response table. So I'm just going to call it temp responses, and I need to store the survey question, and I'm going to need a session ID. This is just going to be a unique identifier, and I'm going to generate that when I open up the pop-up, and then the question response is just going to be text for now. So I'm going to create that. Now let's go back into the survey here and add this workflow action. So on my index page, when I click the survey button to pop it up, I have a session state on the pop-up called session ID, and I'm just calculating a random string of 8 characters. What I'll do is I'll remove that value when the pop-up is closed as well, so it resets every single time. I mean, you can go crazy with this if you wanted people to be able to save their progress and come back to it without it being submitted. I'm not going to worry about it for right now, but maybe I'll do that in a future update. So now this has this will retrieve the session ID, and now I can add the workflow here. So when that value is changed, I want to create a new thing, and that new thing is going to be a temporary response. Because I'm doing the action on that input box, I have access to this multi-line input. Session ID is going to be that custom state value, and then the survey question will be the current cell's survey. Now I only want to create that if it doesn't already exist, so I'm going to have to do a check, and I'm going to have to search for any temp responses where the session ID equals the session ID that's in the pop-up, and the survey question is the current cell's survey question. If I want to be extra safe, I can say created by equals current user. So it's only going to do that when the count is 0. Now I'm going to have to do make changes to a thing, and it's going to change if that value already exists. So I'm going to have to do a search for the same temporary value. So search for the temporary value where the session ID is what's in the custom state. The question is the question they're currently modifying their answer for, and then created by current user. So the thing to change, obviously I want to get rid of count, and I want it to be the first item. It should always be the first item unless something goes horribly wrong. And then the response, I want to change it to whatever the value is there. And that's really it. I don't have to change the session ID. I don't have to change that question, but I only want to do this when the count is greater than 0. So this will allow that field to be updated, and it will only always create, in the case of this survey, 4 temporary records. Now to test this, I'm just going to add a text value on here. And see if I can just make this a different, I'm going to make this a different color so it's obvious. Let's make it green and bold. So I want this to be search for the temp response where the session ID equals this session ID from the custom state. The question is whatever the question is for the current cell. And then just to be safe, created by equals current user. This should always be the first item, and I want the question response to show up. So as I'm adding the answers and modifying them, you'll see what the database value is there. So let's try this out and see if it works. So I'm going to add this. So let's just call this question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4. So the green value is what is in that temporary table now. So let's just say I didn't like the answer to question 3. I want to change that again. So it's just going to modify that. I could do the same with this one. And now just to double check, I'll go back to the database and make sure that there's only 4 temporary answers here with that session ID. So this should allow me now to take these questions and just simply stuff them over into the main survey response thing. All right, so now let's wire up the submit button so it will create separate records for all of those answers. Now I'm not going to be able to do this inside of a inline workflow here because there's no way to create a list of things and loop through that collection. So I'm going to have to do I'm going to use schedule API workflow on a list. I want to use the create survey responses one that I'm going to create in a second, and I'm going to use the temporary responses. So the temporary responses that I want to use are from the temp table, and the only thing I need to check for is the session ID. So just grab me all of the questions that are associated to that session ID. So that's going to get me the list of questions, and then that API workflow that I created, it is going to take whatever the survey question is, what the temp response record was, and then the survey that it was part of. So I'm going to pass in this temporary response, the survey question, then I'm going to pass the actual temp response record. I could just use this one temporary response record if I wanted to as well. And then the survey to show, and then I want to run this on the current date and time. So you know what, let's actually just fix that right now. So I don't need this question because it's already stored. So I really just need those two because the question I'm asking is stored inside the temp response. So let's go back and see if this works. So survey, I'm going to say question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4. It's probably good enough. Hit submit survey and oh! So we have question 1, we have question 2, question 3, and question 4. So let me just go back and check the data really quickly and go look at the temp responses. This is probably the new one, question 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, now let's create the rest of the workflow. So this is going to get the temp response and it's going to get the survey that it's a part of. And I am going to create a new thing. I want to create a question response. The question is going to be the survey question from that temporary response, and the user response is going to be their actual response. So that's going to create those two records. Then I need to make changes to the survey and the responses. I need to add the output of step 1, and that should be it. And let's hit submit. Let's go back here, and there we go. So we have the 4 questions that have been inputted there, and if I go into surveys, I now have a list of all of the survey responses. Okay, so that's as far as I'm going to take it for this video. What I'm going to work on for the next one is the delay that happens here when you're answering the questions. So you can see as I'm changing the input value, then it is it's a little delay before that shows up on the screen. So I might have to adjust my submit button, probably with a little pause option. So I might put in a pause action to just let it wait for that to update. That's not the best way to do it. I'll probably figure out a better way once I'm actually making the video. And then the next thing in the schedule the API workflow, once it's created the responses and the surveys, actually I can just do this now. I can delete a list of things. I can clean up that temp response table. And actually I could just, I'll do delete a list instead. So I'll just do a do search for the temp responses where the session ID equals that value there. Get rid of those 2 REs. And then that will clean up the temporary table. So that should keep it nice and tidy, and that solves the problem now of wanting to have maybe a couple of different text-based surveys. And the next video, I'll work on using different input types to add to this survey tool, and then also a little quick admin tool where you can add and remove questions and look at the responses. So hit like and subscribe if you want to see those. Thanks for watching.